And we are back with day two of Survivor 46 and 46. I just finished the very, very long Survivor the Australian Outback finale, which I will touch on in a little bit. But today I'm joined by Kyle. Kyle, last time I saw you was back in 42 with HHH. I feel like this season is better, but the finale is way worse. So going right
Yes.
into it, what has been your interactions with Survivor the Australian Outback?
So the Outback is probably the season that I have watched the most over the years. It was one of my first seasons. I watched it when I was like 10 years old, when I first started getting into Survivor. So it holds a super special place in my heart. I know it's kind of lost a lot of favor over the years, just in terms of being slow and boring, which is certainly the case can be made for that. But it's always been a special one for me.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this a lot tonight. Survivor the Australian Outback was the season that convinced me 4 years later to go to Australia, where I learned how to play rugby, which eventually led to me becoming a rugby coach in my career. So I've always held Australian Outback like way up here. And every time I've watched it as an adult, it's like, okay, I feel like the only reason that I still really like this is because it actually changed my life. And so, spoilers, I'm still going to give it a relatively high rating, but it's mainly because of everything. Because today was kind of a drag I would say once once Jerry goes home, it becomes very boring to watch, especially when you know that these three are just going to flip from one group to another. And it's fun gameplay compared to what we get in season one, but it's very dull watching, and they're dying, which is going to be a 3-season story arc from now until Marquesas of just people just being out there on their deathbeds, except for this time it's 42 days, which is somehow worse.
Yeah, you almost forget that it's 42 days. You know, it's like, oh yeah, there was actually a season that went even longer than 39. And we agree, didn't need to be 42 days. I mean, they immediately went back to 39 because it did not work. That finale is. You want to talk about that?
Oh my God! So I texted Kyle right around Final Four immunity, and I'm just like, hey, this is my update. This is where I'll probably be, and the finale just drags, and especially after Keith leaves, it should be almost immediately going to Final Tribal, and it's like it's not. It's like action shots. We're hearing about how this game has changed their lives. We're getting the jury talking and everything, and it's just like, but it's so much worse because the episode has already been so long at that point. And then Final Tribal goes, and that's probably the shortest part of this episode. Jeff flies on the helicopter, which I do love. I tear up every time I see it. Then when he arrives, he rambles on for a good 7 to 8 minutes. And it just get to the votes. And Colby even says, let's get to the votes. And Jeff still talks for another 2 minutes before they actually get to the vote. And I know that a lot of people have said, historically, this is the worst finale of all time. I think this time around, I'm going to see if I can figure out if it actually is. Now, it's off to a hot start because Borneo's is way better. Yes. But I don't think we're going to get a worse finale than this for a long time. So what do you think really messed with, what really killed the momentum for you in this season overall?
I think I would agree that it is after Jerry goes, because that's like the first real blind side of the series. I think is like that's kind of generally considered. I mean, Mitchell, I think was
Mitchell, maybe even Gretchen,
yeah.
With a big character though.
I love the auction, which happens in the very next episode. So
I forgot that started in this season.
It did, and it's probably my favorite auction of them all. There's just something about the rawness and like the newness of it that is so much fun. So that's probably the last thing that I always look forward to whenever I'm watching this season. So yeah, I would agree. It's around that time where it gets so slow, and just adding that extra episode in where it didn't need to be totally kills the pace.
It does, and I want to touch on this because I do think that's an interesting take. I mean, I would say that it's probably a hot take, but I don't think it's as hot as people might try to make it out to be, because I do think that they won differently. Rich had his 4. He was one of maybe 2 people that were actually playing the game. So it's Kim Spradlin-esque as far as like, hey, we've got 2 people out here. I'm one of them that knows how to play, so I'm just going to get my crew and we're going to do it. I think that's what Kim does in One World. I think here, Tina very early clocks, hey, if I can get these 2, she uses the meat shield strategy before it became an actual strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, okay, I get Keith, who everyone hates randomly. Like this time around, I didn't really understand the Keith hate. Everyone's
glad you said that. Yeah.
And we're going to get to Keith, the Keith of it all. And then I'm also going to put myself behind Colby, and everyone's going to keep trying to target Colby, especially if he keeps winning. And because Kucha is so after Alicia wins as far as people that could potentially win an immunity, I think Nick won in the middle of there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, okay, no one's going to beat this man in it. And all I have to do is be nice enough to few these Kucha people, make sure that I'm building these relationships, make sure that Jerry is more pissed off at Colby when she leaves, so that when the time comes, I can sit there and say what I need to say. And I do think that Tina overall, because she actually was playing on a season with people that knew how to play the game, I would say that there is merit to she's a better winner than Richard. I wouldn't personally put her above, but like, I don't think that's the craziest thing.
I don't either. I actually, when I was at one point, I was randomly thinking about like the players, and I've tried to do like winner rankings just in like my head and stuff. And I got to the point where I was like, is Tina actually maybe one of the best players and winners that there's ever been? And I wouldn't necessarily say that she's in like the top 5 or even the top 10, but I do think that the case can be made just because she does kind of expertly flip from side to side without burning any bridges with people who are still left in the game. And yes, she does still get Jerry's vote at the end. She builds favor with the Cooches who are going to the jury. So, and then she doesn't get targeted from anybody who's in the game. She never gets a vote throughout the whole season. No. So her game is actually really, really impressive. And I think that if this was a newer season, we would see it differently, because I don't think that they really knew how to handle the type of gameplay that was in the season with like the tie vote that happens with Mitchell and the flipping on Jerry and all that sort of stuff. So perhaps a different edit would actually show Tina as maybe one of the very, very best.
Which is ironic, because 4 seasons later, Rob does the exact same thing in Amazon, where he's just flipping back and forth. And you see it done so well this time, and probably even better because she actually wins the game. Mm-hmm. And, every time I've watched the season since then, I've tried to watch it as with Colby as the follower, Colby and Keith as the follower. But the Keith of it all is, I know everyone likes to give Colby all the shit. Oh, you should have taken Keith and this, that, and the other. And Colby wants to be admirable and bring Tina. I didn't get the Keith hate this time around. I understand that like he had this whole tiff with Jerry, and I understand that sometimes he can come off as a little corny, especially the whole peas and carrots thing, which I just had to like turn my head from because I couldn't do it. But why do you think Keith got so much hate here?
I don't know, and I don't think I've ever really understood it, because he comes off just as like a little bit of an interesting guy. He's a little quiet, but they seem to, Jerry and him just go at it. And I think maybe he became not insufferable, but just annoying to be around, that like Jerry was overtaking his chef skills, and maybe that hurt his ego. And it became a little bit of like a sore loser around the camp, and just brought the morale down. So that's my best guess. I don't really get it.
So he's not a bozo in your head?
Not a bozo in my head. I don't think that he's a great player by any means, but he doesn't do anything wrong.
No, he doesn't. And the thing is, like, because Colby is there, Keith is always coming up like second in most of these challenges. Mm-hmm. Keith's a fairly good physical threat, I guess. Socially, you never really, besides Jerry and like Colby's couple confessionals towards the end about him, everyone usually has pretty good things to say about Keith in this season. Yeah. And he gets along well with Roger. He takes care of the tribe, even though he can't catch fish at the beginning of the season. He has, they're in the minority on the OG or Ogakor tribe, but like he has people that he is working with, and the fact that once again Tina is able to say, "Hey, let's us three do this," and can get the two of them on the same side to the point where there's a scene where they're sitting in the tent, and it's actually just the three of them discussing their options, and it's like this is a very underrated trio. Everyone looks at it as a duo, but like this is a trio that I feel like ran this season from beginning to end, even coming to the merge where it's tied 5-5, and they just navigated so well. And I feel like people just kind of sleep on Keith for reasons.
Yeah, and one other thing at the merge during that perch challenge, Keith and Tina are the last ones up there, and he says, "Hey, I need this. Like, they're probably going to vote for me, and I've already got votes. So and I'm the only one. So if we protect me, then we can't lose this."
Yeah.
And even Tina, who I don't think she even realized, like, it seems like sort of an obvious play, but even her, who we just talked about as being such a great player, even at the time, I guess people weren't really thinking on that level. And he was the one who was like, this is the way that we can get the numbers and get this round. So very smart play from an underrated player.
Yeah, and I can see how looking at this comment, I can see how that could annoy people, especially being out there in those specific elements and being out there that long. But it all, like, most of the hatred usually came from the same 2 to 3 people.
Yeah,
and it wasn't everyone, but I can understand it, I guess, and especially towards the end, like no one wants to be told what to do, and that is when we get the Colby "he's a bozo" line. So like I get it. The other thing that I want to touch on, and I should have looked it up beforehand, but I know for the longest time this was the season that had the most returnees. The first player season that had the most returnees. Yeah. I'm fairly certain it's still the same because they have 8. Do you think that's high? Do you think, just based off the 8 people that we've had come back from this season, are there glaring mistakes of like people that have come back that probably shouldn't, and other people that we would have potentially wanted to see again?
I do think that's high. 50% of a cast is really, really high, and there are some who I didn't feel like we needed to see again, like Kimmy.
Oh my gosh!
and obviously other people on the cast who, their returns haven't aged well, but
not aged well at all.
One of my personal favorites is Nick. I've always loved Nick. He's one of my favorite.
The first purple player ever, Nick Brown.
Exactly. I don't know why, but he's just always been one of my favorites. So we need a Nick Brown return. But as far as anyone else, I don't think that anybody who hasn't come back needs to.
Needs to now? No.
No.
Historically, I would say that the only person that I could say, maybe would probably be like Roger. But even then, it's like, okay, like the fact that we didn't, I'm not crying over it. And ironically, there are 2 people in the season that play on All-Stars that I didn't think would come back, especially watching after this time, is Alicia and Amber. And Alicia, notoriously during they call it touchy subjects in the OR community, but the Chop Challenge and All-Stars, the most non-deserving of being an All-Star. And I've always been like, okay, yeah, I feel like I agree just based off of who was out there. I might make a case for Rob Mariano at that point, but Alicia and Amber coming back was very weird. Kimmy Kappenberg winning a fan poll to play Second Chances was very weird. I understood Jeff Varner because I did. Yeah. I think Varner in this season is the best version of Jeff Varner. I don't know that that's hard, but this is the best version of Jeff Varner. And, it's not funny in 2024, eyes, but when he says he wants to shake the shit out of Kimmy because she won't stop talking, it's like, that is funny, in the year 2000. And I laughed at it last night because it's like, yep, I can understand why someone there would be annoyed with someone with a Long Island accent, being from the South and having your own accent. What were your thoughts on some of these other characters that, probably don't get talked about as much from this specific season? So, like, we talk about Varner, but not because of this season. We talk about Kimmy, Do we? We
Yeah.
talk about Alicia. I feel like more because she was one of the very pissy people in All Stars because everyone's
Right.
pissy in that season. What were some of your thoughts of those folks?
Um, I really liked. I've always liked Alicia. I think in this season she's much better than in All Stars. Because like you said, just everybody was in a bad place in that season. Um, but when her and Kimmy have the fight about the chickens, it is such a classic moment, and I always just love it because it is that is the show. Like as in these olden days, like that is how the show was. People fighting about food and people from different walks of life deciding how to do stuff. And I think Alicia and Kimmy were two perfect examples of that. Um, One of my favorite quotes of all time comes from Jeff Varner in this season, where he says, "I don't want to sound mean, but it's all about kicking somebody's ass after they win a challenge." And that's why people liked him,
Yeah.
and wanted to see him back. So there are
And
so
honestly, his
many.
second chances performance wasn't the worst. I
No,
mean,
it wasn't the worst. I mean, he was in a bad spot here. Again, the one person who had votes at the merge won immunity, so he did, and Kimmy on her way out was like telling people that Jeff
telling
had
people,
a vote, which is that's the game. That's part of the game. It
yeah,
absolutely sucks,
at
but
this point,
that
it's
is
it,
what it is.
and we have one more season where the tie vote thing is what it is, and we'll what Thursday? What's today? Monday. So Wednesday we'll get to the purple rock of it all. Um, Another thing is this. I feel like this is the season that Jeff becomes Jeff. Like Jeff
Mm.
is very stoic in season one, and early in season two, like he starts off as stoic, and then all of a sudden, I think the part where I pinpointed it was when he shows up with the rice and it's like, yeah, it's $1 million. And then all of a sudden he becomes very animated. And every other tribal after that, Jeff becomes very animated in his speech and things that he is saying at the reunion. I mean, I know we didn't get Jeff in season one reunion, but he's very animated here. I think this is where the character of Jeff Probst is born. And I want to get your thoughts on, do you think that we still have a few more years or a few more seasons before we get to that point, or do you see that happening here?
I think that's so interesting that you brought that up, because I actually think in Borneo, I find him to be a bigger character than he is in the next few seasons. Like when
Okay.
he brings the oranges up to Kelly during the final immunity challenge and is like, "Smell this, Kelly." Like he's being really like playful with the contestants. I think in season one, he's still obviously trying to find exactly what he's doing. And I do think it is quite a few more seasons until he really finds himself. Whenever he's like reading the last vote, for instance, he'll always say something different. So I think maybe around like China is when I would say Jeff really becomes Jeff.
I mean, where he's pointing out Courtney's weight during during the
Yeah,
reunion.
and he's getting more brave, you
Yeah,
know. So I think that that's a really interesting point, that you think that it happens here.
yeah, I say the first signs of Jeff Probst the character, probably in my head, yeah, it starts around here. And the other thing is, and I said I was going to bring it up at the beginning, and I didn't. At the finale, or at when he's reading the votes, right before he reads the votes, he talks about they've had time to decompress. They've had time to go home, and they would react a lot differently if they had to read the votes in person, which is funny because that's been one of the main discourses, whatever, of the Survivor community currently is everyone's tired of watching them reveal the votes while they're still out there and not giving people time to decompress, go home, think about and ponder what happened out there, and
Mhm.
even in season one, we get it, but like it was the first time. And the fact that Jeff's preaching that here, and we fast forward 23, 24 years, and it's like, no, we're just going to keep on doing this. Do you feel like, I mean, as a current fan, do you feel like there is merit to continue to do it out there, or do you think there's no reason for us to still be out there?
I don't think there's any reason for us to still be out there. Even if we did it like in Winners at War over Zoom, as weird as that was at the time, I don't think it's weird anymore. I mean, we could do it as a live reunion, So I always think that's much better. give them time to think about things. Even in there, Jeff, as you were watching it, Jeff said, "Now you all haven't discussed your votes, right?
Yeah.
You don't know who voted for who," which we all know
Just
everybody
do
does.
yeah,
So
come on.
it allows maybe the losing finalists to realize that they've lost by the time of the reading of the votes, and especially just this previous finale with Charlie. That for me was like the nail in the coffin of like, this is not fun to watch for anybody, and it's not fun
Yeah,
for them.
it's
So
I'll go watching Mike Turner
he,
like
yeah,
and like and I wasn't I mean Mike Turner's fine and watching him sit at that reunion it's just like this man is in shock. This man is
yeah,
in shock, Jeff, and you're asking him questions and offering him pizza. He probably doesn't even know what's going on right now. Uh,
yeah,
and and I feel like with this and with the pageantry of him, the first time of Jeff showing up to reunion, which we're gonna get a lot over the next like 10-ish seasons. Um, it's a lot of fun
yeah.
to get eggs until he lands. It still drags afterwards. Um, Going back to this comment now, everyone like I'm not one of these. Oh yeah, we have to not say this person's name. Whatever the fuck. Scoop and falling in the fire will always be one of the most important moments in the show's history.
Mhm.
Old school, new school, whatever. It is one of the most important moments in the season's history because up to that point, there were still a lot of people that thought that it was fake-ish.
Mhm.
And I think I remember where I was when it happened. I remember the first time that I saw his skin melting off of his hands. It's a very dark moment, and I feel like that episode is actually still pretty good because we get a lot in that episode leading up to it. That's like the final. It's like the final 12 minutes, and then they cut to Ogakor, finding out that someone has been ejected from the game. So the first time you watch this season, and every other time that you watch since then,
Mhm.
thoughts on the scooping thing without talking about what happens later, which we'll get to. But
Of course. It's always a shocking moment. It is always like, you can't believe this guy who was the captain of the tribe, I think, unequivocally.
he kind of named himself that. But
Named
yeah,
himself, of course. Yeah, took that role, which everybody was happy to let him have.
yeah,
He watching him fall in a fire and have to, it shows that the elements are real for everybody, and it's actually quite a graphic thing to show on
yeah.
TV.
They basically
So,
showed him kill the pig too, and them shut.
oh God, that's another,
Yeah,
yeah. I've
there's a
never,
lot of stuff in the season where they just kind of like, oh yeah, we'll let you use your imagination at the last second, and then
yeah. Um, it really is one of the most iconic, if you want to use that word, moments of the show. And people who watched it forever, that long ago and haven't watched since, they will remember that.
yeah, the scooping falling in the fire and watching it. I mean, every time I've watched Australia since then, it's like, okay, just remember the scooping thing, remember the Varner thing, remember. I tweet this out every time I watch it. It's like, yeah, growing up is realizing that Kucha were the bad guys the entire time,
Yeah.
because like half of that tribe and maybe more are like super problematic. But scooping falling in it, I still feel for the man in that moment
Right.
because in that moment, it's like, yeah, they show the skin peeling off the hands, and it's so real, and you can't in 2001, you can't really fake that on TV in that moment and make it look that real. And
Yeah.
I think that's when people like it clicked in people's heads. Okay, this is the real
Mhm.
deal. And I think and I'm going to talk a few things about production. One of the things is they saw that, decided, okay, next season, let's put them in Africa and surround them with
Yeah.
lions because that's what the people want. They want to see these people almost die. And
Yeah.
then, season after that, they go to Marquesas, and I feel like, and it's a common thing now of like, I feel like they pay attention to the wrong things. Oh, they want more big moves. Let's introduce more advantages.
Mhm.
Back then, it's people want to see the survival aspect, so let's throw them in Australia, and let's not protect their stuff while they're away at a challenge.
Yeah.
When they're and they let their camp get taken away.
Yeah.
Do you feel like production, especially in these early seasons, has a obligation to in situations like
Mhm.
that, kind of step in?
I think that the part with their stuff gets taken away by the river, not necessarily. I know they forced them to live on the beaches of a river, but in that sense, I think that was just part of it. Like it sucks so bad for them, but they did end up finding some of their stuff.
Yeah, almost
Yeah,
died at
yeah.
night. You have to go out and try to get it at night, and it's
I
like, all
can't
right,
believe they did that. I think the Lions was too far. I think Africa was ridiculous. I still love Africa,
oh
but
yeah,
I mean, it's just crazy. You could be wandering outside, and I mean, if a lion shows up, they still had an entrance to that camp. So if
yep.
a lion comes walking in,
Well, and that's what they
what?
tell them. You have to build your camp well enough so that lions can't get in. And if they just decide to flub and not build their camp to the way it
Yeah.
needs to, the lions are going to get in. Also, I didn't realize how short the Australian reunion show is. Show is. It's already over, and Africa's on in the
Wow.
background. I just paused it. So, yeah, I didn't realize it was that short. Unless it like cuts some stuff out that wasn't on the initial airing. Um, so okay, so yeah, we'll give you the production should have stood. Why
Stepped.
can't I speak? Stepped in. Um, Nick turns to the camera and to the producers when Scoopin falls into the
Yeah.
fire. Which the rumor and innuendo is they kind of get annoyed because they're supposed to be invisible and blah blah blah. They're filming Scoopin like they see it happening, and it's not until Nick and the rest of them are like, "Hey, something's going on." In that situation, I'm going to assume that we agree that production probably should have done something a little bit faster.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, they watched him fall in, and Nick is the one who has to turn and say, "Oh, it looks pretty bad."
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. You would think that may be a moment where they put the camera down. Like I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Nightcrawler or
the
familiar
the
with
the,
the
the Jake Gyllenhaal movie.
Jake
Yeah,
Gyllenhaal one. Obviously it's not that extreme. It's Survivor, but like I get that's sort of I guess the idea where it's like, wow, we need to keep filming no matter what happens, like because we can't miss anything.
yeah.
So, which
This
is
is what the
not a
people want to
great thing to
see.
do.
They want to
Yeah,
see these people die. It's like, no, we don't. We
yeah.
don't
It's like
want to see.
we need to zoom in on these the skin, it's instead of
Which is
like,
a very iconic
of
scene.
course,
I mean,
yeah. And it
they,
is, yeah. I mean, it is interesting to think about. Like somebody was just standing there with the camera filming that the whole time, and
yeah.
they did. It took a while for medical to get there. Seemed like so. Yeah, that is an interesting point, and I never considered it, but it is true that they were maybe relying on the shock value back in the day. Like they thought that's what the reality show um, market was all about, which it was for a little while, and Survivor certainly, I think, played into that, and then
Yeah, after a
made their
while, I
own
think
thing.
they realized, oh, people actually don't want us to kill our players.
Yeah,
They want to see the social strategic aspects of this game. And yes, I do miss the exotic locations, whatever. And I mean, I'm fine with Fiji; it's fine. But I do think one of the positives, and I mean, say what you will about Thailand, and it's the worst. Thailand is very like it's one of the best things Thailand has going for it is the scenery of the
yeah,
season. Going from Africa to Marquesas to Thailand, I would say Thailand has the best scenery of those 3 seasons.
yeah.
Um, Australia, like, and I love Australia, but it's just so barren and just like
Yes.
there's the scenery is horrible, and it's you're watching these people die, and you're gonna get that in the next season too. It's like you're just watching these people. Colby, by the time they merge, Colby's face is like his cheekbones are showing, and it's not
Yeah,
even that long into the game.
yeah.
Um, I my rating for the season, I'm gonna still give it a 4 out of 5. I'm not gonna give it 4.25 like I gave Borneo. So Australian Outback, I'm gonna give it a 4, and it's only because of the historical significance that it has in my personal life. But like I said, once Jerry goes, it just falls off the rails.
I would probably give it a 3.5 out of 5 because I think,
That should be.
for me, it still holds a special place. but I don't think it's one of the stronger seasons. Even the cast, I think we've been overexposed to the cast now, so saying it's a good cast to me doesn't really mean much anymore.
Yeah.
The locale, like you said, is barren. I do like a lot of the challenges. I love the one where they have to
Yes.
carry people on the stretchers. We get
The
the
water
bear the weight
challenge, where they have to
challenge.
hold on. Yeah.
Yep. So we
The,
do get a lot of good challenges, and I think the gameplay, while it's interesting, is not handled as well by the show because they didn't know exactly what they were watching or how to edit it. So it just makes for a little bit more of a boring watch. It's like I don't really get what's going on here because the show isn't really portraying it in a cohesive way.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
you
it's
know.
ironic because everyone loves to complain about pagongings.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, in Borneo, a legitimate pagonging does happen, and like I enjoyed Borneo so much yesterday. It was such an easy watch. And we don't get a pagonging here, and it's more boring to watch. I feel like when the next pagonging happens in Thailand, and
Yep.
that's bad. From there, I think it's Palau. No, not even in Palau.
Not even in
Yeah,
Palau. I
not even
mean,
Palau.
Guatemala, kind of.
Kind of, yeah, but
Panama for sure.
oh yeah, yeah, Panama
Yeah.
for sure. Well, still not
And then
really
still
because
Terry, yeah.
yes, Harry still, but the original Pagong, like the reason that Pagonging is a thing is because of the Pagong tribe, and that season is still looked at more fondly, even on rewatches, than a Redemption Island or a South Pacific, and is even better than the season that comes right after it, where there is more fluid gameplay,
Mhm.
and it's still, because of everything that surrounds it, the 42 days, the fact that they have no food by the time, I think the Nick episode, I think, is when they run out of rice, or maybe it was the one after that. um it just leads to a very dull watch where I can actually sit on my phone while I'm watching it. I didn't do that at all yesterday with Borneo.
Yeah. Yeah. Borneo is one of my personal favorites. I think that it's still one of the most interesting seasons to me. And for some reason, this one, like we were talking about, especially towards the end, it just gets so long. I mean, it's Colby watching Colby go on reward after reward. It's like it starts to blend in. It's
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up because I think that if anybody else was winning those reward challenges, Jeff would not have just continued to show up. I
probably
think
not.
he had a man crush on which we all know that he had a man crush on Colby. So he just kept on going, and oh yeah, Colby, now I'm here to do this. And Colby, if it was Roger or like Keith, definitely showing up to hang out with them.
No, he's not.
No, absolutely not.
Oh, one of my favorite moments from the season, which is one of the most awkward moments I think in the show's history that people don't ever talk about anymore, is when Keith proposes to his girlfriend
God.
over email
Over email or over
or
not even
whatever it
email,
is.
but like
It's like,
messenger, yeah.
yeah,
It
like,
is so awkward. It's
so awkward.
That's what I said earlier. Like I had to turn my head because I'm like, this is just weird. I
Yeah,
don't want to see this.
like I
Oh,
don't
you
think
can
that
call me Sweet Pea. Oh,
Oh yeah, I don't think that constitutes an official engagement. Like, what would he say when they meet up next time? Like, so we're engaged, right? Like, I don't have to
now.
bend down, like any. It's just always been weird, but
That, and it's so funny because Colby refers to himself as the Colbster in the same scene, and that's less cringy than peas and carrots and hey, you can call me Sweet Pea.
yeah,
Yesterday I talked a lot about archetypes, and in the first few seasons they kept trying to cast the archetype, and I think that the Elizabeth Roger archetype starts here. They try it again 2 seasons later, and it's creepy. But I think that I think it hits its perfection here, of the young girl and the older guy, where it does come off as dad, daughter, or whatever. And I feel like
yeah,
as the show has progressed, the roles have reversed. So it's the older woman, younger man.
yeah.
But because they tried it, like I said, they tried it again in Marquesas, and I just every time I watch Poppy or Pappy, whatever, and Nalia, it's like this is weird. And I
Yeah.
think it's because Pascal always rubbed me the wrong way. But I really like the Roger Elizabeth dynamic, and I do feel like if things had gone a little bit differently, we could have had other fun older man, younger woman dynamics as the seasons progress. So what were you think of their relationship?
I love their relationship. Roger, especially, is one of my personal favorites. Um, and it felt really natural. Like, to me, it didn't feel like they were pushing these archetypes to be together. I don't know if that was in the mind of the producers at the time. So to me, this just felt like a really natural relationship that, like you said, they tried to recreate to, lesser and lesser extent as time went on. So I find their relationship to be one of the highlights, especially towards the back
Very
half of the
wholesome.
season.
Yeah. Also, why is Amber so pissed off when she votes for, like, she seemed like very angry at Tina. And I think that kind of carries over into All Stars because she's I remember her saying some things in All Stars and I'm just like, wow, what did Tina do to you? Because you seem very angry at this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm just put where to go. There we go. I don't think I agree. I agree that they could and they probably should have, especially knowing that the tie vote rules. I think Amber got back in good graces with the Okafor 3. I think that's the only reason that didn't happen because, yeah, Elizabeth and Roger could have pulled her in, tied a vote, and gotten Keith out of there at that point because he would have still.
As a matter of fact, Colby actually votes with Amber at that vote. Like, it's a 4-2 vote. And when Amber goes home,
yes,
and Colby, so they could have just flipped and outright voted Keith out of the game. And I never really considered that. I don't know why, but yeah, it's true.
I've never considered that either.
Yeah, I guess Tina to me, that's just a testament to Tina's game.
Yeah.
Making, as Gabe says, making Amber feel comfortable, as well as keeping Roger and Elizabeth in with her and wanting to.
And that would also explain why Amber, because Colby voted with her.
Yeah.
She's probably like, okay, well, she's probably, because it's old school. If you voted for me, I'm probably not going to vote for you to end at the end.
Yeah.
One last thing I want to touch on about the finale. Once again, this is now 2 seasons in a row, and I think it continues for a few more, where the question of what are you going to do with the money gets brought up. And I know people are being pissy about it happening in 46 and like that has no place in the game. It's like, well, you guys are always complaining about how you want old school Survivor back. That is something that happens in old school Survivor a lot. And it's not just the early seasons. It continues for a while. Do you think, especially in the older seasons, that held much? Do you think that people actually cared? Do you think that they're just asking the question just to ask a question? Or do you think that people are actually determining their vote based off of how people are answering that specific question?
That's a great question. I'm glad that you brought this up because one of my favorite answers to a jury question is what Colby says, where he's going to buy a Harley Davidson with the money.
Yeah, tell the truth.
But yeah, and it's like, maybe, that's probably what he would have done. And I don't know if that could have affected a juror's vote, that he's not going to use it for, something else like his parents or a mortgage or something. I think that it's just an easy question to ask. I don't know. I think by the time of the final tribal, people know each other's lives. They know what situation they're in financially or what they do for work and all this sort of stuff. So I don't think that it really is bringing anything new to light unless you're Q and, that's, that's what you're voting based on. But I think it could just be another reason to justify voting for who you already wanted to vote for.
Yeah, I agree. Well, any last thoughts on the season before we head out? So I can start Africa. I'm going to knock out hopefully 2 or 3 episodes tonight so I can stay on pace. Any final thoughts on Australia and Outback?
I don't think so. I think we covered pretty much everything. A special season, a classic, the most viewed, I think, in the show's history. Yeah. So a super significant one for the show's legacy. This is one that potentially people will remember even more than Borneo in terms of
I feel like the cast.
Viewership. Yeah.
The cast especially. Like I remember like turning it on and I immediately just went through my head, boot order, straight down the line. without giving it a second thought. Borneo, there was like a couple that I would switch in my head. Oh, when did Dirt go home? It was before or after this person.
Mhm.
Here's like, yep, they just go straight down the line, and until Jerry, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Quick question.
Yeah.
What do you make of the beef jerky thing? Because it is a big part of the season.
It was grass. Like
I think this whole thing is so silly.
I think it is too, and I feel like when we really didn't touch on Jerry in this,
right?
Watching it now, yes, I understand how Jerry might be portrayed as a villain in 2001. Mm-hmm. I get it. Colby is not Captain America like as he's been portrayed historically. Like he's kind of a dick a lot of the time. But because we have to root for him and not her, we're always like they're going to portray him as this. I think one of the only negative moments I felt, for Jerry was the beef jerky thing, because I just thought, why are we doing this? Like, that it didn't bother me to the point where like I need to turn it off. But Tina even brings it up during Final Travel. Like I felt bad going through his bag. It was gang mentality of like, oh, let's all go look, and she just kind of does it. I think it's grass. I don't think it's ever been determined what it actually was.
No.
But I also feel like production probably would have stepped in for that.
Yeah, I think they would have found out if it was there. I don't really know, and it doesn't do anything for me.
Final thing, we did this last night too. Yeah, nobody for 50. No one.
I don't think so either. I think a lot of them are getting up there in age. It's been over 20 years. I think even Tina is the only one who I would even want to see. She's played 3 times already. So yeah. I agree. No one for 50.
No one. Nick Brown.
Yes.
No, there is nobody from the season that I want to see on 50. And I don't think that there's going to be anyone from the season on 50. If I had to say a name, fine. Just put Jerry back out there.
Jerry's probably the most likely. I mean, I don't think we see anybody before season 10, in my opinion. I think maybe 10. 50,
absolutely not. Time. But
yeah,
put Jerry out there. I think she's in her 50s at this point, so like she's young enough.
Yeah, looking great.
They're in Fiji. They're not in Australia anymore, and they're not. She doesn't have Rupert building her camp.
Oh
so
God,
she'll be fine. And she doesn't have to deal with Russell. Okay. Kyle, thank you so much. We will be seeing Kyle next for Ko Wrong.
That's right.
We'll be seeing Kyle next for Ko Wrong in late June. So I'm excited for that. Kyle, thank you so much for hopping on last second today. And I hope to see you again, maybe between now and Ko Wrong. We'll see. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow for Survivor Africa. Until then, we'll see you on the other side.